The construction of the World Trade Center was an incredible breakthrough in skyscraper design.
It was the project of the century. Everybody wanted to work on the World Trade Center.
The latest in building technology allowed designers to go bigger and higher than anything the world had ever seen.
It was just whammo, you know, the two biggest skyscrapers in the world.
But then came the 11th of September, 2001. It's still not known how many people perished in this nightmare of collapsing steel and dust. Now, as the site is cleared, serious questions are emerging about the buildings themselves. Just why were so many unable to escape? And most importantly, was the collapse of the World Trade Center inevitable? New evidence suggests that the buildings may have been uniquely vulnerable to the attack, and that their design prevented people from escaping before one of the world's most renowned buildings was reduced to this. Less than 3 miles from where the towers once stood, clues to their collapse lie in gigantic, twisted heaps in this New Jersey scrapyard. Time is short. The piles of high-strength steel evidence are being cut into chunks for export to recycling plants in the Far East. The deals with the scrap merchants have already been made. As each massive piece arrives, huge grappling machines struggle with lumps of metal that weigh over twice as much as the trucks used to transport them. The very ground shakes as they drop just a few feet. That some of this steel fell a quarter of a mile to earth is difficult to believe, and how anyone inside survived is hard to imagine. But a few did survive, among them firemen, who witnessed the destruction from the inside of a stairwell as the North Tower collapsed on top of them.
We were all in this little pocket in this stairway between the 4th and the 2nd floor. And this unbelievable sound, I still remember the sound of steel, these massive steel beams that are roughly 5 feet deep, twisting around us like they were little twist ties off a loaf of bread. I'll never forget it.
The reason the Twin Towers fell is obvious. They were, after all, hit by large aircraft carrying many tons of jet fuel. But at the same time, it's not at all clear that any other skyscraper would have collapsed so soon, or so completely. The person who might just know more about the World Trade Center than anyone is the structural engineer who built it. His offices in this lower Manhattan building once boasted a commanding view of the complex. Now they overlook one of the biggest salvage operations New York has ever seen.
the responsibility for arriving, if you will, at the ultimate strength of the tower was mine. And the fact that they didn't stand longer could be laid at my feet. Do I feel guilty about it? About the fact that they collapsed? The circumstances on the 11th of September were outside of that which we considered in the design. Today, if I knew then what I know now, they would have stood longer, of course.
Back in the 60s, when terrorist strikes were not a credible threat, the towers won many awards for their engineering, which was cutting edge for its day. The way in which they were built and eventually collapsed was due to the extraordinary demands made by the scale of the project. The complex was to have more office space than the entire city of Cincinnati, taller than anything ever built in a town where high winds can be a severe problem. And all of this to solve a common blight: inner city decay.
In the mid-60s, American cities were very troubled. There was poverty, there was crime, there were race riots, there was a lot of worry about whether or not they could even survive. New York was troubled. There was a lot of worry about New York's future.
It was decided that a rundown section of the city known as Radio Row should be demolished and replaced with a high-tech, landmark building, something fitting for a country poised to embark on the space race.
It was a classic American response to a problem, which is hit it right down the middle with as much firepower as you can give it. 2 110-story boxes, the tallest towers in the world. Well, that was going to fix everything, right? That's how we thought in the 1960s.
Back then, the man in charge was Guy Tozzoli, who 35 years later saw the towers fall as he drove to work.
Honestly, I never thought the towers would collapse. It just never occurred to me. They had stood there since 1970 when we opened. It just didn't seem possible. I remember I cried sitting in the car.
In happier times, Mr. T, as he was known to his staff, was put in charge of what the Reader's Digest called the biggest building project since the pyramids.
My job was to make a program which the architects would follow. How many feet of office space, how many feet of consumer service area, a place for customs, a hotel, and then to find the architectural team that could carry it out.
The architect was to be Minoru Yamasaki, or Yama as he was known, a Japanese-American who died in 1986. He conceived of a pair of 80-story towers sprouting from a huge open plaza. But even these giants would not have been enough office space for Mr. T.
I said, well, does it meet our program? No, he said, it's not. It's 2 million square feet short. Well, I said, why is that? Well, he said, you can't build a building taller than 80 floors. And I said, why? Well, he said, because the elevatoring in buildings taller than 80 floors make it impossible to be rentable.
The problem was that with a building over 80 stories tall, so much of the lower floors are taken up with the elevators needed to service the upper floors that the building becomes uneconomic. But this minor issue wasn't going to stop Guy Tozzoli.
And I remember saying to Yama, President Kennedy is going to put a man on the moon. I think you could build us the tallest buildings in the world.
The problem was solved by treating each third of the skyscraper as a separate 40-story building, so that fewer elevator shafts would be needed. This pattern was repeated 3 times, and the whole system was linked together with 2 express elevators that would go the whole height of the building.
If you went to an upper floor of the World Trade Center, you didn't get in the elevator at the ground floor and go to your floor. You got into a big, giant elevator that was an express to what was called a sky lobby. And there you switched for a local elevator to your individual floor. That's what they did, and that's how the buildings happened.
Solving the elevator problem meant that it was now possible to build on an unprecedented scale, to construct towers that would eventually become synonymous with America itself.
We were constructing a building which put up high in the air a huge amount of rentable space, much more so than any building in the past, or indeed any building today. In order to do that, we had to rethink the whole process of designing and the technology that went into the design.
It quickly became clear that New York's occasional 100-mile-an-hour windstorms would be the dominant factor.
The lateral push of the wind on the World Trade Center is perhaps 4 or 5 times larger than the earthquake load would be if you build it in Los Angeles or in Tokyo.
Such a vast building would be blown around in the wind, not only backwards, but from side to side as well.
We had to think about the dynamics of the motion of the building, not just the fact that it leaned a little bit in the wind.
The solution was to make the building of high-strength steel, concentrated in the exterior walls, a unique and dramatic departure from conventional skyscraper design.
Most skyscrapers are built on steel or concrete frames, which is a grid of columns and beams that goes all the way through the building. The World Trade Center was different. It was what engineers call a tube structure. It was a very, very strong mesh of steel that surrounded the exterior.
The way these walls were built was equally ingenious. 3 30-foot-long columns were welded together off-site to make a relatively lightweight yet rigid prefabricated panel. This was then hoisted up to join thousands of similar pieces, forming an enormously strong wall of steel. In the middle stood a steel core, which would contain all the stairwells and elevators, allowing for one of the tower's major selling points: large, open floor spaces.
Tenants like open space. It's flexible. It allows them to have big open rooms if they want, or to put temporary partitions anywhere they please.
There was another advantage to the system. It would save money.
You could do a tube structure with roughly half the amount of steel than you would need for a conventional frame that goes all the way through the structure, but it would hold up just as well. It would be just as strong.
The end result was a building of extraordinary structural efficiency. Hundreds of acres of office space held high in the sky by the minimum amount of steel. Steel that now lies in a scrapyard and holds the secret of how this revolutionary design came undone.
TLC brings the past to life in a brand new special. Experts recreate an ingenious invention, the world's first submarine.
No steering, no power.
Terrifying.
Building the impossible, the first submarine, Monday at 10 on TLC.
What's the matter, Bob?
All this paperwork from my mortgage broker is driving me crazy.
Perhaps you should log on to Ditech.com.
Hey, I need a home loan, not a website.
Ditech.com is one of the largest direct lenders in the mortgage industry.
What about the rates?
Here's today's low fixed rate.
Oh. Can I use the mouse?
Be my guest. Ditech.com, your 24/7 mortgage solution. Call 1-800-71-FIXED.
Get ready. Get set.
You look great! Thank you.
Thank you. And go.
What are you waiting for? Let's go!
Because Steven Spielberg's E.T. is coming home to the big screen with never-before-seen footage and enhanced visual effects. E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Rated PG. Only in theaters Friday, March 22nd.
Today's business thought. Global network access? Good. Massive security breach? Bad. Preventing the former from becoming the latter? WorldCom. Want confidence? You'll find the path very clearly marked. WorldCom, the leader in globally managed VPN solutions on the world's most scalable global IP network. WorldCom.
Millions of bees convene daily. It is this single-minded sense of purpose that makes the bee the most formidable competitor in nature.
I'll never get used to that.
Rock. Commercial-free, coast to coast. Beyond AM, beyond FM. XM satellite radio.
Sunday on TLC. He wrote the last letter of his life.
None of us can escape to the surface.
As he drew his final breaths, what really happened at the bottom of the Bering Sea?
It failed in a very catastrophic manner. The cold, the hypothermia.
You saw it on the news. Now you can feel it in your bones.
The truth about this must be told.
The Kursk, Disaster at Sea. Sunday at 9 on TLC.
Can you say ha ha?
This is unbelievable.
Please hold for
Never pay for long distance again with Singular Wireless. And now for March Madness, get 3,500 night and weekend bonus minutes plus a great deal on a Nokia phone. Welcome to nationwide self-expression.
Freehold Mitsubishi has real deals for real people during our presidential 000 sales event. That's 0 down, 0 interest, and 0 payments until 2003 on any new Mitsubishi. That's right, 0 down, 0 interest, and 0 payments until 2003 on any new Mitsubishi. Come home to Freehold Mitsubishi today. The 000 sales event ends Thursday, February 28th at 9 p.m.
The World Trade Center was built at an astonishing rate. 3 floors every 2 weeks. Steel came from all over America and beyond, arriving just in time to be hoisted to a new home in the sky. Efficiency was a buzzword taken seriously by everyone on the team, especially project manager Guy Tozzoli.
Well, the first thing I did is I scheduled meetings of 17 minutes. That was the maximum you could have my time. And I took it religiously that way. And you got an answer. That was very important. Because if anything was delayed, $1 million a day to stop this project. And it had to be done on time.
Every aspect of the design was optimized in order to save weight and therefore cost. The steel varied in strength and thickness from tower to tower, since, as a pair, the buildings would shelter each other slightly from the wind.
two towers are different. They're different in many ways, and to me, they are not twins. They were. Oh, I have that problem. Present tense, past tense. They were different, and I thought of them that way. I always thought of them as together, that is, brother and sister, or two brothers and whatever, or two sisters, but not as twins. I always thought of them as different.
The final job was to place a 350-ton TV antenna on the top of the North Tower, taking its total height to 1,719 feet. But already the winds of architectural fashion had changed, and the towers were harshly received by the critics.
They were all but ignored by the architecture community, except to sneer at them from time to time. And I remember saying that they were just utterly banal, and how sad it was that the biggest buildings in New York were the dullest.
Architects may not have liked them, but they were a hit with the public. And one incident in particular helped to break the ice between the severe, minimalist structures and the fiery population.
I had a direct connection to the police desk, and the light went on as I'm driving to work in the morning, and the sergeant on duty says, Mr. T, we have a problem at the World Trade Center. I said, what is it? He said, there's a guy walking on a tightrope between the two buildings. What should we do? And I couldn't think of it. I said, tell him not to fall off.
The daredevil was a Frenchman named Philippe Petit.
Then I called back about 15 minutes later, and I said, I've been thinking about it. I could use the publicity, so don't arrest him. But the city of New York police said he must be arrested. The judge called me after he had him in court, and he said, he's such a nice young man. What should he do? I said, just don't hurt him.